Director of Art here at the Cape Cod Museum of Art. So welcome to the exhibition. Curator Samuel Tager, mural artists namely Esteban de Valier, Felipe Ortiz, Jackie Reeves, Sophie Tuttle, and Joe Wardwell. And welcome to our museum members and to our guests, to Walls That Connect, the Cape Cod Mural Project. If you like what you see here today, I hope you'll consider joining our museum as a museum member. By doing so, you'll receive many museum benefits while also supporting all the relevant cultural programs we offer here at the museum. So please pick up a brochure at the front desk, and I thank you in advance. For the proceeding here tonight, we'll start here inside and hear from the artists as they speak about their creations, and then we'll move as a group outdoors and do the same for the murals on the facade of the building. This exhibition had several standout supporters. I'd like to acknowledge Joselie Santos, Special Advisor to the exhibition. She's the Massachusetts Transformative Development Initiative Fellow, and she had input early on in the process, so thank you to her. I'd also like to thank the Cape Cod Foundation, the La Montage Gallery in Boston, the Ragosa Gallery in Eastham, Mid-Cape Home Centers, Jane Paradise, Ro Osborne, and Diane Depensky for their important contributions of time, talent, and treasure. Thank you. But this ambitious exhibition wouldn't have been possible without the persistent hard work of Samuel Tager, here to my right, curator of the exhibition. Samuel Tager has been developing, designing, producing, and installing museum and gallery exhibitions for the past 25 years. He served as the director of exhibition at Harvard University's Peabody Museum of Archaeology and Ethnology, and more recently as the assistant director and senior designer for Harvard's newly formed Museum of Science and Culture. In 2020, Tager became the founding executive director of the Provincetown Public Art Foundation, and since that time has guest curated and designed exhibitions for the Provincetown Art Association and Museum, the Cape Cod Museum of Art, notably the Cartography exhibition, the Jane Paradise exhibition, the Pilgrim Monument in Provincetown Museum, Harvard Law School, and the John F. Kennedy Presidential Library and Museum in Boston. Tager also serves on the board of directors of the Provincetown Arts Press. In his role as the executive director of the Public Art Foundation, Sam commented to me that there was one wall available for public art in Provincetown, and his foundation commissioned Esteban de Valier to paint it as one of their first projects. So now that Provincetown is all full up, that leaves the rest of Cape Cod, and Dennis in particular, to be the recipient of new, breathtaking, and thought-provoking murals. That was basically the genesis of this exhibition. Sam created detailed elevations of the facade of the museum and for this B.A. Hunter Gallery to help all of us conceptualize the transformative power this exhibition would have. He made many trips crisscrossing the Cape to get input from people like artist, author, curator Lauren Balk, Julie Wade from the Arts Foundation of Cape Cod, Matt Kemp, head of the Art Department at Barnstable High School, Caitlin Aber from the Cape Cod Foundation, Josie Santos, who's with us here tonight from Mass Development, and of course, and most importantly, the artists themselves. It was an honor and an adventure to work closely with Sam, driving a box truck with him to Boston to pick up some of the murals, and working with him and Ro Osborne, who's also with us tonight, to attach the mural panels to the museum facade, without harming the structure, I might add. So thank you, Samuel Tager, for spearheading this project. We wouldn't have done it without you.
Thank you, Ben. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the board of the Cape Cod Museum of Art and the staff. I'd like to start with Joyce Gromer, who tolerates me with a brilliant combination of talent and cheerfulness and forbearance. Joyce, thank you. And then I would not blame you if you didn't want to do another project with me anytime soon. But I do want to say that I think that Ben Jones is an outstanding museum leader. And his passion and talent and commitment to this institution make it a credit to the art world on Cape Cod. So Ben went through the list of most of the people that I spoke to, and it's true that this project did spend a certain amount of the winter months in a kind of a state of grandiosity about all the organizations and nonprofits and the infrastructure that we were going to be kind of pulling in and connecting, and that we were going to be using this project to build a bridge between this lovely institution, its community and its campus, and the more urban parts of Hyannis, and therefore we were going to be engaging with younger people, and that really is still our principal goal in the coming months. The exhibition is going to run through mid-November. And so I really appreciate, first of all, Josie Santos, who is large part of my inspiration for this project. Josie spent hours with me. She's the veteran of many successful municipal public art projects. And Josie, thank you so much. Julie Wake tolerated about a 3.5-hour phone conversation with me. I got 2 tours of Barnstable High School from Matt Kemp. Who else did I speak to?
Caitlin?
Oh yeah. Oh, actually, on the absolute briefest introduction, Lauren Woke agreed to meet me at the parking lot of Cape Cod Community College and drove me on the most amazing annotated tour of the 7 villages of Barnstable, most of which I've never seen before. Is Lauren here? Anyway, that was really, really lovely. And then finally, as I was just sort of spinning out and the time to really get this thing nailed down was feeling a little bit out of control, I spoke to Sue Dolling Sullivan, and Sue, we had a really lovely conversation, and she provided me with a perspective and a kind of orientation that really helped move this thing forward. And I really, really appreciate your time so much. Thank you. When Ben presented the opportunity to curate the exhibition here, I guess it was probably last fall, I was thinking about murals. I was thinking about the many great mural projects that all of us are seeing. There are murals all over Boston and Cambridge and Somerville now. But more importantly, there are murals in places like East Boston and Lynn that have really had a transformative effect on those places. And I've been working as the executive director of the Provincetown Public Art Foundation for our inaugural project. We did have Esteban de Valle paint an absolutely beautiful mural on 12 and 16 wall. Esteban is represented in Boston by Russell LaMontagne. Did Russell get in here?
I'm here.
And Russell suggested to me that I look at the work of Joe Wardwell, and I said, yeah. And then I said, oh, Joe Wardwell, the guy that I saw at Mass MoCA and the ICA. And so is Joe coming, Russell?
Yes, he's not here yet.
So hopefully Joe's going to come. Joe's a Boston-based artist.
He's on his way.
Okay, great. And then Joey Rugo's not here yet, but he's coming. And it was at Joey's gallery that I first was introduced to Felipe Ortiz's work and to the work of Sophie Toto. And really, I have to say that Joey's practice of showing studio work of important mural artists was a real inspiration, because as I started to think about organizing a mural exhibition, the sort of most serious question in my mind was, what is the natural gallery component of an exhibition about murals? If we're going to have an outside component, if we're going to add murals to the outside of this building to join the beautiful sculpture, and as you know, there's sculpture in the garden by Paul Bowen and Gil Franklin and George Perez. But what would the gallery components of that be? And would it be that we would celebrate the studio practice of these artists, or would it be that we would document the mural making process, or would it be that we would allow artists to create site-specific works that they may not be able to do in either a commercial gallery or through a public art commission? And we have 5 artists participating in the exhibition. Each one of them created a brand new site-specific piece for this show. 3 of them are outside, and 2 of them are here in the gallery. That may be as much as I should say. I wanted to work for public speaking in the 8th grade. It's been downhill ever since then. I was told on the drive up here that I start saying things and then switch and start saying something else. So if there's anybody that's familiar with the narrative that I'm supposed to be conveying to you, and I've missed a huge part of it, just please prompt me.
Doing a great job, sir.
Otherwise, okay, so there's all this work that goes into the exhibition. But if you do that well, it all disappears when the work gets hung. And that's exactly what happened here. That now it's all about this absolutely remarkable work these artists produced. And it'd be great to hear from those artists now. Who? You don't have to say anything if you don't feel like it, but it'd be great to hear from you. And Esteban just got here, so maybe we should start with someone else. Really so glad. Jackie is a studio artist and a professional mural painter and a teacher.
Thank you. Thank you for including me in this exhibition and thinking of me for this show. I'm really honored to be showing these artists. I, like you, Sam, am an improvisational speaker in public, so I did not plan anything because I didn't really know exactly what the environment was going to be, how much time am I talking about? Anyway, somebody give me the time when I have to talk, because once I start talking, it can go on and on. So I'll address this piece. I think that's what we're doing in here now. So this is my piece on the back wall. And I thought, actually, one of the things I did think about talking about today was answering the most common question that I get as an artist. And that is, well, there's 2 most common questions that I get. The first one is, how long did that take to paint? And so my answer to that is it's impossible really to time how much time you spend on a piece of art. In this particular case, because this is something, for example, that I started maybe in 2018 and finished in 2022. So you don't sort of keep track of the hours that you put into a work when it's developing over time. The other question I get is, what did you do first? Like, how did you decide that you were going to paint this? In my practice, I don't decide really what I'm going to paint. The paint tells me what I'm going to paint. So I dive in first with abstraction, with color and shapes, and I move things around, and I just get the paint flowing, and then it starts to tell me what the piece is about. And for me, the reason I do that is because I want to learn something new. I like surprises, I like to be informed, I like to discover something about myself that I didn't know. And if I over-plan things at the outset, then I only ever create something that I knew I was going to make. So I'm interested in making something just being surprised. So I set myself up with a process that has, that involves a lot of accidents and surprises. In this case, very fluid paint, so I'll work with acrylic paints, and I lay the work down the surface. This is painted on fabric. I'll lay the fabric down on the ground and start pouring paint, and then something happens that I wasn't expecting. It always happens. I start to learn a little bit what the surprises might be, but I never have control. And then it's this give and take, this relationship of letting go and then reining it in. So I let go and just allow the paint to do its thing, and then I look at it and I assess, and then I go in and do my thing, and then I do something that will create another accident or surprise. And at some point along the way, the idea comes to me. So I do jump into the middle, I would say, and then work my way out. And in this piece, it started out as one panel, and then it became a diptych, and then it became a triptych, and then they kept moving around until I finally decided when it was done. That's the other second question, is how do you know when it's done? And I'm sure all the artists in the room, of which there are so many, will say that that is a really difficult question to answer. Sometimes it has to do with a deadline, or somebody bought the piece and took it away from you, and you can no longer keep going back into it. And sometimes the work will just tell you, there's nothing else wrong with this piece, you can walk away now, it's over. But you know, if work stays with me long enough, it is in danger of getting reworked over and over again. So, but sometimes for the better, oftentimes. Like this piece originally started out as a drawing with figures, and it eventually evolved into being a much more colorful painting than I originally started out. So here I am talking on, and it has been 10 minutes. Should I wrap it up? Does anyone have any questions about this piece in particular? There's a little story on the wall beside it that will explain the imagery. I did grow up in a family with two architect parents, and so I have always had an interest in drawing, in plans, and plans that become scale models, that become real architectural buildings. So for me, this piece is called Big Plans. It was painted during the pandemic lockdown, when all our plans went out the window. And so it's an image for me that is about dreaming, making plans, revising plans, building new plans, and working in that way, which is how I work in my studio. So I think that's all I'll say for that, and pass it on to the next artist.
I was the recipient of the inaugural commission by the Provincetown Public Art Foundation in 2021, and I just want to say, because they're standing right here, that Nancy and Al Osborne were the principal contributors to that project, and it was, thank you so much. I still was currently in residence at the Fine Arts Work Center in Provincetown, and was painting the mural outside until about 45 minutes ago.
Thanks. Great turnout. Thank you all for coming. Excited to meet Jackie. It was my first time meeting Felipe, which was really nice because I hear his name everywhere. It was a great project. I'll follow Sam to the ends of the world when it comes to working together, because he, time and time again, has shown me that he's willing to get his hands dirty and sweat right alongside with me. And Ben was joining us, including the fact that I decided in true diva fashion to add a panel to my mural 4 days ago. I hadn't even started, and they drove it up so that I could paint even bigger. Because that's what you want to do when you're running out of time. I'll tell you, this is my piece right here, To Go on Foot. This was previously shown at La Montagne Gallery in Boston, where I was working with Russell for a show called A Little Something More. And the title came from looking at high and low culture, as I often do in my work, starting with Dostoevsky, an excerpt from a book called The Brothers of Karamazov. And there's an excerpt of The Grand Inquisitor, in which This brother's telling a story of a Christ-like figure returning to the world and doing all these miracles, walking around, and people start following him, and then basically the church steps in and seizes him and puts him in a dungeon. And at that point, his figure hasn't said anything, and the Grand Inquisitor begins to grill him and basically accuse him of ruining everything the church has built, accusing him as if he is Christ. It's like essentially saying people weren't ready for freedom, people want bread. And that whole conversation of man does not live by bread alone became a concept that I kept thinking about. And then fast forward to years later, watching an amazing reality TV show called Alone, which is a survivalist TV show that I really love. And after watching seasons and seasons of this weird survivalist reality TV show, I noticed there was a pattern, and which when everybody had all their basic needs met, they had their shelter, they had their food, they had their calories up, they had their fire. They still wouldn't necessarily win the competition because it seemed like they still needed something more. And when they had none of their basic needs met, when they were basically starving to death and freezing, they still seemed to need something more. And in both cases, those people tended to turn to creative projects. They often would make something for somebody back home, or they would turn to decorating their cabin or something like that. And I realized this kind of eureka moment of man does not live by bread alone, but there's this place for art. There's this place for creativity, in which creativity fills that little something more we need in life. So that series was in response to that. This specifically is a view of photographs that I take visiting the MoMA, watching everybody photograph Starry Night on their phones. And that figure in the center is actually me falling into the painting, kind of dropping this bouquet of sunflowers that I had. And it's called To Go on Foot. And you can read the full quote on the side, but it's a quote from a Van Gogh letter he wrote to his brother about death, in which he was saying that, I imagine you can take a train to the south of France or something like that. And he's like, well, then I see illness and death as a way to take transportation to the stars. And he says, maybe cholera is like taking a train to, the stars. And then he says, to die of old age would be to go there on foot. And I thought about how MoMA is this kind of church for me. There's something more in my life, where I go and I pay homage to Van Gogh's work. He's one of my favorites. So I constantly go to visit this painting and I will take no pictures, but I watch everybody take these pictures. And I understand why they take the pictures. It's not a judgment, but there's something about kind of seeing that in your space. It's like if you've ever been to the Vatican, you hear the Italian guards constantly yelling, no photo, while everybody's trying to take photos of the Sistine Chapel. So there's this really ongoing conversation for me about art and that little something more, and how I personally relate to it versus how I feel like the audience and the people around me relate to it. We're not speaking about that on the sidewalk.
We'll go outside and speak.
Okay. All right. So that's it.
Felipe Ortiz is an artist who I heard about for months, I feel like, before I met him. There was this intriguing mural artist living in the home and studio of the well-known artist James O'Shea in Wellfleet, and I think we finally crossed paths in Provincetown, and I did see his work for the first time at Joey Rugo's gallery. Felipe is originally from Colombia. He went to Mass College of Art, where he's currently installing a large-scale mural, and has painted murals throughout this region, the country, and I think the world.
Thank you. Thank you everybody for being here. It's actually really wonderful to see so many of you here. It's very humbling and actually very wonderful that you all get to see this exhibit. This was a lot of work put together by everyone involved, which I'd like to thank also Bente and Sam and really everyone involved that made this show really wonderful. It has been months. I think I was one of the first, I think, contributors as far as ideas and how we wanted to see this show develop. And it has happened 6 or 7 months later, and I think it's an absolutely wonderful show. It's great. And for me in particular, this particular painting that I did here which is called A Dimensional Escape. And it's actually revisiting an idea that I had a long time ago. Actually in 2009, when I was a senior in college, I wanted to create really large-scale sculptures and be able to display it publicly, and I wanted to adapt it to a mural as well. I had this idea. I didn't necessarily know how to translate that, and but I wanted to do it anyways, and the first step was to build a sculpture. And so this sculpture, which comes out in relief maybe about 7 inches from the wall, is something that was created in 2009. And since then, I think just I graduated college and real life hit, I guess, and just went back to traditional studio painting and canvases, and something that was smaller per se and would fit in a gallery. And this idea was sort of left dormant for a little bit, and then years later I decided to take my work outside publicly, and I started painting large-scale murals, and I started traveling to many different cities and painting and really engaging with the public and the idea of public art and what it can do to communities. And I got really into the process, and I started traveling to different countries and seeing how public art is received there and how it's produced, and just seeing the differences and also similarities that we face here in the States versus other places. And just really like being aware of the importance and the weight and the value that public mural has in a community, in a public space. And I took that very serious, and I aside from just the image, I always took in consideration the placement of it and the surroundings and how people interacted with the sculpture and how they moved around it and how they felt once they view it from far or from close. There are different variables that I wanted to keep in mind as I created these murals. And then once this opportunity came about, it was an invitation to be able to merge both my studio work and my public art. And I thought of this idea, I had in 2009, and there were no walls at the time to be able to do something this large inside. And until now, that this opportunity was offered, and I'm very, very appreciative of it, because this is a dream come true, really. For me, I've been wanting to do this, since 14 years ago, and even though I had a vision, I didn't necessarily know how to get to it until now, and as I have a new set of skills and more experience, and so hopefully this will be a style or a piece that turns the page and hopefully leads me to explore this sculpture / painting. And particularly with this, my main idea is to try to get the viewer to see a piece of art a little differently than the traditional way we're used to seeing pieces. And the example I was using was, and it happens to me a lot, and the example I used was that sometimes I'll be at a museum, right, and I'll be walking by so many paintings, and some of them maybe didn't really grab my attention or didn't stand out, and I just happened to walk right by the painting. And I'm sure this happens to many of us when we go to museums. And then I thought about it, and I was like, wait a minute, I just walked by this painting, and this artist, wherever it was, probably spent their lifetime creating something that could go into a museum, and I just walked right by it. And so I had the idea, and I was wondering, how can I captivate the viewer from far away, from close, or as they moving by my painting. And if I can get their attention for an extra 30 seconds and invite them to explore more, for me, I saw that as a success. And so in a way, I wanted to play with dimension a lot and have almost like an optical illusion here. And the idea behind it is kind of to try to extend the shapes that are three-dimensional into an illusional three-dimensional shape that is painted, and be able to camouflage both the 3D and the painting. And so this is my attempt at it. It's something very different than what I've been doing for the past 10 years. It's a different body of work, and I'm really excited. And just looking forward to exploring this style more.
Okay, great. Sophie Tuttle, this is her work. Here, Sophie is a Boston-based mural artist, originally from England. And I think that Sophie was the subject of the first conversation I had about this exhibition with Joe Rugo at the Shell Station in East Ham. And he said, Sophie just muraled up a school in Dennis. And I've been wanting to work with you ever since.
Thank you for including me. I feel really honored to be here. I come from like an illustration background, so to be included in museums maybe like 15 years after college feels really like not something I was expecting when I graduated from college. So thank you so much for including me. Thank you everyone for coming here. It really means a lot to us. Yeah, so like Sam said, I'm primarily a mural painter. I work here in Boston, so I work probably about 7 or 8 months of the year, and then I get to spend a few months in the studio when it's snowing and cold and we can't really work outside. So this is the work that I created in 2020 in the pandemic, actually when all of the mural work kind of cooled down for a little bit, like everybody else's work. I was thinking about how to connect my artwork and my mural work with work around activism and environmentalism. I do a lot of work around native and endangered species, working with scientists and environmentalists and activists and people who are trying to spread awareness and preserve the nature that we have here. And 2020 was the 30th anniversary of the Massachusetts Endangered Species Act. So I connected with some folks from Massachusetts Fish and Wildlife, and they were telling me about how their endangered species program and all the programming they do around it and how it all got canceled because of the pandemic. So I worked with them and spoke to a few different scientists about the projects that they're working on, doing like restoration work for different species in Massachusetts. And then I made this work based on my conversations with them, and based on either the abundance or the very little information that we know about the species. So we know, for instance, a lot about eastern whippoorwills, but not so much about that moth that I can never remember the name of. Slender clear-winged sphinx moths. So this project was originally installed in Gallery Curation 250 in Lowell, Massachusetts. And I did a project, there were a bunch of other pieces to run along with it. And I invited some of the scientists to do Zoom lectures to try and get a little bit of community engagement. And some of the other pieces were for sale, and the people got to choose which half of the profits went to an organization that they got to choose. So I think a lot about how I can push action and change through my work, not just kind of looking at it and then thinking, oh, that was really nice, I feel inspired. Now you feel inspired, what are you going to do about it? So I like to try and get people to take that next step immediately. So that's kind of where this work came from. And yeah, it's I don't have a lot of time in the studio, so it's a really nice way to be able to show this work again, because it takes so much time, and then you show it for maybe like a month or 2 weeks or something, and then kind of languages. So it's really nice to be able to show it again and talk about it again and share it with you all.
Would you like to come forward? You could speak next to your work. That might be even more relevant.
Sure. Everyone here at the museum for putting this together, Sam and my dealer, Russell Lamontagne. So it's been a great supporter of mine, and all the other artists. It's really nice to be at the show. Thank all of you guys for coming out tonight. I'll be brief so we can enjoy each other's company and refreshments. This is my work here, and then there's the larger piece on the outside. outside, sort of, I think right there on the wall.
Joe, we're gonna all go outside, and you can talk to those specifically outside.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
great. Yeah, okay. Well, these are two of the most recent paintings that I've completed, and like Sophie, I'm also based in Boston, and I'm work both in sort of what I call like gallery format and then large-scale mural pieces, which I've been doing kind of since about 2017. When I did a large mural that's still on view at Mass Mocha in North Adams. And that's kind of where I designed the process that you see here. And there's kind of the shorthand way that I say is that it's kind of like a landscape painting and a text painting and an abstract painting. And if you mash them together like a sandwich, that's kind of my work. And like Felipe was kind of mentioning a little earlier, I really think of my work as like trying to create not really such a harmony, but something that kind of creates a visual density that is sort of at odds with itself in some ways, and so that it kind of it makes you stop, it makes you pause in front of, and either to read it or to dissect the landscape imagery or anything that kind of like brings the viewer more intention, and also kind of like the back of my mind is to kind of push the languages of painting, to take the idea of multiple genres of paintings and kind of put them at odds to each other, and then have the resulting, which I think is really important to be able to continue to push the language forward. And but at the core, I still think of myself as a landscape painter, even though they have all these. I grew up out west, and open land and landscape is really very much where I sort of draw a lot of inspiration, even now living out here, visiting, the Cape and being at the beach like I was a little bit earlier. And it's that landscape is kind of at the core of the work. And then where the abstraction and the text come from is that when I was growing up, I was involved in music and playing in bands, and I lived in Seattle in the 90s, is where I went to school, and was very influenced by music and the imagery associated with it. So a lot of the fonts and the original idea of the keyed-up chroma of the colors comes out of silkscreen posters that were like plastered all over the telephone poles for announcing shows and bands. And then most of the lyrics, or most of the text that you see in the pieces come from song lyrics that I like to have removed from the context. And some people will recognize them, some people won't. For me, it's just like a jumping off point of where I see, it's not like I want someone to look at the paintings and have like a jingle kind of running through their head. It's more like, I think, I listen to music the whole time I'm working, and sometimes lyrics will stick out to me, or to Russell as he oftentimes texts me lyrics I think will be great. But the idea is that it's something that's sort of almost ambiguous, that if you kind of stopped in front of it and you read it, it kind of gives you pause. It doesn't say one thing either way. I like to think that obviously with landscape there's it's inevitable that you run into environmental issues, and there's messaging and propaganda and different kinds of ideas about advertising. But for me, I really like to have them open-ended. So a lot of times people will ask me like, well, what were you thinking? What were your what's the idea behind this painting? But a lot of times I don't really like to decide what the lyrics are meant to be. I like that to be a relationship that the viewer develops on their own. And in that way, that the pieces can then kind of like almost grow through time. Like they could have different meanings to different people at different moments. Like the words read at one moment in someone's life could have a certain kind of understanding impact, and then later on something else. And so they're really meant to be open-ended. I guess that's it.
Is everybody pretty much outside? Can you hear? Okay. Here you go, Esteban.
In a good way, I hope.
This is even weirder than inside. Okay, so this is my mural over here. Remember, it started with 3 panels, and remember I was just telling you I added one. I guess I used to work as a professional muralist for a while. Murals have been a part of my practice. I grew up painting graffiti in Chicago. I currently live in Brooklyn, but have been coming to Provincetown since I was a fellow at the Fine Arts Work Center. And I've spent a lot of time here, including this past summer. And when I was painting murals like more actively, now I do maybe about 1 a year. And the past 2 have essentially been with Sam. The mural practice kind of evolved out of my own studio practice, and it became these a lot of times like autobiographical murals. I thought it was like interesting and kind of subversive to put these autobiographical and maybe even intimate moments in this monumental space and public space. And I have a mural in Provincetown that deals with partially deals with the wild spirit of Provincetown, and it's kind of being domesticated over the years. And I use the fox as kind of a stand-in for people. In this case, I wanted to talk once again about my relationship to P-Town and being an artist there, and being an artist that has been trying to move there for several years and can't quite find year-round housing, and just friends that deal with the housing issue, and friends, and the whole idea of like P-Town being so important for the arts, but it can't support artists anymore because we can't afford to be there. So I decided to use musicians, and specifically some friends. This is Will Harrington, who is actually from Dennis, I found out, and he's the lead of the Ugly Vipers, which play in the alley, and I met them while I was painting my mural. Will has been playing for years. Every summer I've heard about him for a long time, but it wasn't until I was painting this mural that I connected with all these amazing musicians. The trombone player is Megan, and Megan actually plays in Spokane, Washington for their orchestra, but she comes here in the summer to play in the street. And then the top person is named Sharky, and he's a banjo player from New Orleans, because Will started going down to New Orleans in the winter, met a bunch of New Orleans musicians, and then they all came back to Provincetown, and they play in that alley, and they play in the OC as well. So I had this idea of this scene of kind of Will as this Sisyphean type figure pushing this, trying to keep, because if you see him in Provincetown, you see him rolling his piano around everywhere. He rolls it from the alley to the OC, and they roll it in the bar and out the bar. And as a person that grew up painting graffiti and doing live painting at bars and even doing plein air, I'm used to that idea of like packing your gear and going somewhere and bringing it back. And so I love seeing Will push his piano around. So he's also trained in repairing pianos. So I was imagining the scene of him almost like tuning / trying to keep the piano from going down with the ship as Megan's kind of getting consumed by the waves and Sharky's in the background in the zone. And this was definitely inspired by the story of the musicians on the Titanic who continued to play as the ship went down. And once again, to like my story inside, it's really about this kind of embracing that overly romantic artist life of just realizing how beautiful art is and creativity. And in the meantime, these figures in the foreground are just kind of completely indifferent or not paying attention. One person is just fully engrossed in the privileged space of oysters and shrimp. Those shrimp are from Victor's, which are delicious. And then the other guy has his iPod on, and somebody earlier visiting pointed that out, and they were just like, why is this person listening to music when there's music everywhere in front? I was like, exactly, that's the point. And you see the monument in the background. And then it's not without, the idea is like I always want to implicate myself as well. I'm not fully innocent of not doing everything I could to support my peers and support the arts as well. So this figure in the foreground with the martini up is actually me. So yeah, I don't have a title for it yet, but a title I'm playing with is what's the plural of Sisyphus? Thank you.
Thank you, Esteban. Esteban was painting out here this morning with a tarp to kind of protect the mist from hitting the mural, and I slowed him down a little bit, but I think you might be able to capture him painting a little bit more doing some final touches if you want to come back and visit the museum and check it out. While we're here, we can hear a little bit more about this mural from Joe. Are you available, Joe? Okay, great.
Hi, thanks. This is my piece here. This is kind of small in the size of murals that I do, so it's a real pleasure to be able to actually kind of fit it in the studio. Although I had to paint it sideways because I couldn't put it up neat each way. I'll tell you a little bit about my process, I guess, on this one. So when I said earlier inside that each painting is it's landscape, text, and abstraction. There's a point in the process where it's a complete, each piece, each layer of that is a complete painting in itself, meaning that I don't have a plan laid out in the end of exactly how it's going to look. And what I do is I put, it's kind of like printmaking, if any of you know how to do printmaking or woodblock print or etching, where the first layer is the fade that you see going from the yellow to the blue. And then there's a huge stencil that gets put over the top, blocking off the landscape. So it's the reverse of what you see here. And then I spray on the purple, and then another small one with the red and the clouds, and that all gets peeled off. And then a giant stencil goes over the whole top with the text, which is the reverse of what you see. And then it gets sprayed out again. And then I put the landscape, the abstraction, which is this diamond pattern, sort of broken diamond pattern throughout. And then that gets sprayed all over again. And then the abstract stencil gets peeled off, and then the text stencil gets peeled off, and it's the final painting. So it's it is a little bit of an arduous process, where each painting is like completely a whole painting by itself, and never know what you're going to come up with at the very end. And it is a lot like printmaking, if any of you have ever done it or seen it done, where you kind of like roll it through the press and you pull back the blankets and you kind of pull up your piece of paper and you're like, oh my gosh, it's finished. You're stunned for a moment, like, well, does it look good? Or does it look... and so there is a moment where the stencil comes off. But one of the things that is kind of interesting, I think that I've kind of learned later in being a painter for a long time. I used to be an easel painter, sort of toiling away at the easel, and there's a lot of sort of stereotypes surrounding being an artist or being a painter, where you're always enjoying that moment. People always say this, say this to me. I'm sure that's fine. Oh, you do what you love. You do what you love. It's true. But it is also like this process is very physical. It's like my paint. It's like sticky. It's sticky all the time. My stencils are sticky. It's a really it's a difficult process to do, but it's interesting that a lot of times that when I have that moment where I can peel off that last layer and you can see it as a realized vision, it's really amazing that all of that comes to, it all kind of dissipates, all that kind of difficulties, all the kind of work, just being able to see, one's unique vision come to life, and then to have it displayed for all of you. It's really, really, really humbling experience that makes it all worthwhile. I know I said I didn't say, I don't really tell you what I was thinking, but I will on this one. I'll ruin it for you guys. So this comes from a song, like I mentioned, this comes from a 1970s, late 1970s, sort of proto-punk song by the band The Clean, Anything Could Happen. And to me, it's, if you listen to the song, it's like kind of a fun, boppy song in the early punk format. But for me, this was really kind of in response to the Vermont floods. I spent a lot of time in Vermont, and I kind of, think of Vermont as my, safe from climate change area, and to see this area that I knew transformed so quickly, so fast, really was this eye-opening experience for me earlier in the summer, and thought a lot about how really, no matter where we are, anything could happen, and it was kind of a moment. And so as I was painting, it started off as kind of this negative, but then I started to think about it more as like as sort of a reminder to be present where we're at.
Great.
Okay.
Sam and I visited Joe's studio in Boston, and he says his work is sometimes very tricky, but he doesn't make it any easier for himself. He's on the 3rd floor of this industrial building, and we had to carry all these panels down fire escape and put it in a box truck. But anyway, anything can happen. So we'll try to extend this as far as we can, and maybe Jackie will let us know a little bit about her mural on the end of the building here.
Hello, hello. Okay, this is as far as I can go. So, like Joe, I think about music when I'm painting, and I think we can all sing the song that goes with this one. Doom, 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 doom. So, I was thinking a lot about what to paint for this this commission, this project, and I really. The thing that kept coming to mind is being on Cape Cod. We're surrounded by water, and I love water. I grew up swimming in water on a lake up in where I'm from, north of Montreal, and I moved to the Cape 28 years ago, and I'm fortunate to live on a pond in Sandwich. I'm on Spectacle Pond, and I've spent all my summers and all my time that I can in the water. I love water. I love floating in water. I love being underwater, and then being surrounded in the ocean. I'm definitely more afraid of the ocean, the unknown, the depths, the things that lurk beneath are always something that kind of scare me. So there's this love-fear relationship I have with water, and I decided to paint something that I love because I want to have fun painting. I do want to also bring up. Have some content, some meaning, something to think about when I'm putting a message out in a mural. Because mural is public art, it's for everyone to see, and I feel like it's an opportunity to say something and to have an opinion. So, this summer has just been crazy, but turning on the radio every day and driving, and all you're hearing is this crazy news about the climate and the heating waters and temperatures rising, and it's just really, it's scary, and it's something that I wanted to paint somehow. So that's why I have the colors that I chose, that maybe above the surface there's something very hot and the temperatures are rising. And it can be a joyous and happy, playful experience being in the water, but there could be something dangerous beneath the surface as well. And so I really like Joe's piece, Anything Could Happen. I decided that's the title of my piece. Thank you, Joe. When I came and I saw that, I was like, oh, that's it. That's perfect. I really couldn't think of what to call this one. I'm like, yeah, anything could happen. Yeah, I don't think I have anything else to say. I think we should all enjoy.
Well, I want to thank Sam Tager for his vision to see what this would look like without having it here and being able to bring us all along with him. And of course, the artists who have contributed their talent and their vision to transform this museum into really something that's really spectacular. And all the people who supported this idea from its inception. So thank you, everybody. Let's go inside, enjoy each other's company, and we'll do it again.